It's time to find out
What Shane
said with Shane Manila.
What is good, world? Back with another Shane Says. Today, very important topic. It's like a public school announcement. That's not what they're called. That's not what PSA stand for, is it? Anyway, a PSA. That's what I'm here to talk to you about today is unrealized potential. Generally, when people talk about unrealized potential, they're talking about someone they knew that was a baller and, didn't finish school, so they never capitalized on it. Or someone that was super smart, but again, didn't finish school because they got into some other things in life. That's not what we're talking about today, because who cares? I'm talking about fantasy football because that's what matters to me. So, what happens when a fantasy football player, or I guess an NFL player, doesn't realize their potential? How does it affect their fantasy value, their dynasty value, more specifically? Not surprisingly, it drops or it plateaus. If they only perform at a mediocre level, there's a very good chance that they'll just be a mediocre asset. Something along the lines of QB 14, wide receiver 16, wide receiver 18. While these are decent enough players, they're not high end, they're not elite. So what happens when players don't perform at an elite level? Again, they become mediocre assets. So much so that even if they go on later to have a standout season, it's really hard for their ADP, KTC ranking, whichever you want to use, to recover. Basically, it becomes harder for them to become an elite asset again, even if they started as one. So I got 3 players in mind that I wanted to talk to you about today. 3 players that I think are in danger of falling into that range. That if they do not have an elite season, that they might be forever discarded to the mediocre bin, the mediocre asset bin, or at least they will never be elite assets. First off, the first player I want to talk about, Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence coming into the league was absolutely adored. You know that. I know that. He was the QB5 in May 2021 on KTC. So he started out here, right at the top. Pretty much not much room to go up. And unfortunately, after his rookie season, he did not go up. His rookie season was bad. It was bad. So he saw a pretty significant dip in his dynasty value, falling back into the low-end QB1 range. Now, following season, he got Doug Peterson. My dude had a very nice QB12 season. It's a good season. It's not great, but it was a good bounce back. So his ADP, his KTC ranking, I should say, bounced back all the way up to QB6. So prior to last season, dude was a QB6. We expected another step forward. What we got instead was a QB13 finish, which is okay. But coming off the back of a QB12 season, that's not the progress we wanted to see. So what happened to his value? Well, this time again, last year, he was the QB6 in Dynasty. This year, QB13. So what happens if he comes out and gives you another QB12 season, QB14 season? God forbid it goes QB15, 16. My dude's going to drop like a rock. And keep in mind, again, this is a dude that was QB5 at one point. What's that? 3 years ago, coming into the league. So he's seen a significant drop. So anyway, I have said this before. I believe Lawrence is a good quarterback. I don't want to disparage him and say that he's not. I just don't think he's elite. Everything about him is just kind of okay. Just okay. Maybe he's extraordinary. Not extraordinary. Extraordinary. He doesn't have rushing upside. Enough to be special, at least. He ranked 15th in QB rushing yards per game in 2023, 23rd in 2022, and 16th in 2021. One thing he does excel at is turnovers. He has the most turnovers since he's entered the league, 60. Second most on that list is Josh Allen. Slight difference between the two. Josh Allen runs for a butt ton of rushing yards, technical term. So they don't really meet there. So Josh Allen might turn the ball over almost as much as Trevor Lawrence, but he makes up for it with rushing yards and touchdowns. Josh Allen has had multiple 40-plus touchdown seasons between rushing and passing. Trevor Lawrence been in the league 3 seasons. His high was 30 combined rushing and passing touchdowns. Just kind of average, Looked at his QBR. Just wanted to look at a couple different stats to see, where he fits in. QBR, he was 17th in 2023, 17th in 2022, and 28th in 2021. Then I went to PFF because I have a sub there, so I figured I'd check out their gradings on him. He was the 15th ranked quarterback by PFF in 2023, assuming I was reading that correctly. And even if I wasn't, all the other stuff I read correctly points to dude being very, very average or good. I'll say good. Average sounds a little disparaging. I don't want to disparage Trevor Lawrence. He's fine as your QB2, right? I'm fine with him as that. I don't think he should be your QB1. Point being, if he comes out, right, and has another average season, there's a pretty good chance that he's going to get passed by a couple people directly behind him in rankings. Brock Purdy, who, by the way, was a QB6 last year, for some reason is behind Trevor Lawrence. And if that doesn't speak to how we hold on to our priors and draft capital, despite players actually playing in the league and showing us something, I don't know what does. But Brock Purdy finished behind him. If Brock Purdy throws up another top 10 season, there's absolutely no way he doesn't leapfrog Trevor Lawrence. Another guy that is behind him that I think could pass him, Drake May.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
No, this assumes Drake May gets some starts this year and looks good, obviously. If Drake May comes out and looks like a trash can, clearly he's not jumping him. But also, don't forget, we've got a 2025 rookie quarterback class. And I don't care if you don't like the class right now. I have heard a few people, the street saying that the 2025 class really isn't that good at QB. Sure. Remember this time last year, I don't think anyone had Jaden Daniels being the second quarterback drafted in the NFL draft, being a generally consensus 102 or 103 in rookie drafts. I don't know how many people had Michael Penix, J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix as all being first-round quarterbacks. So just because you might not like the class right now doesn't mean it won't be a good class. I did find one cautionary tale, right? One player with some similarities. Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is a dude that put up multiple top 10 seasons. He actually had some top 6 seasons, and his KTC value actually never really increased super, super high. But for the purposes of this, I just wanted to look at something that I thought was a corollary to what Lawrence has done the last 2 years, QB 12 and then QB 13. Kirk Cousins had 3 seasons where he was either the QB 11 or QB 12 from 2020 to 2022. The highest his KTC value got during that stretch, QB 16. And again, I know that he started at a lower rate than, or at least a lower desired ability rate than Trevor Lawrence did. But we've already seen, again, Trevor Lawrence's value drop significantly from his rookie year. So I think one more year of averagidity, that's not a word, one more average season, or at least not elite season, could see Trevor Lawrence fall. Next player on this list, I'm just going to hit a couple wide receivers. This is a player I absolutely love. One of my favorite wide receivers in the league, and I'm hoping that this doesn't come to pass. Chris Olave. So for some reason, Chris Olave fell from the wide receiver 8 in Dynasty this time last year to the wide receiver 12 today. That is despite the fact that Chris Olave went from wide receiver 25 in his rookie season to wide receiver 19 last year. So he actually improved. He saw a slight increase in scoring. He went from 13.2 fantasy points per game to 14.5 points per game. And for what it's worth, if he saw a similar jump from from 2023 to the 2024 season, that would put him about the wide receiver 15 range, for whatever that's worth. But it is interesting that Chris Olave actually did take a step forward Again, he took a step forward. He moved from being a wide receiver 3, just on the cusp of wide receiver 2, to solidly in that wide receiver 2 range, and still has seen his ADP or his KTC ranking slip by 4 spots. Interesting. So if a player is increasing his production and his value doesn't increase, or at least to stay the same, what happens if his production just plateaus? What if Chris Olave is just a wide receiver 2? What if he turns into wide receiver 15 season? Again, that's just a wide receiver 2. We've already seen Chris Olave take a step forward from year 1 to year 2, and the market said, we don't care. We don't like you. We're drafting other players ahead of you. And I get that, Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, Marvin Harrison, all these guys are, especially Marvin Harrison and Malik Neighbors, sure, put them ahead of them. The upside, I get it. It does boggle my mind a little bit to see Chris Olave fall like that. And I'm trying not to take this personal. Not going to take this personal. So a cautionary tale that I found similar to Chris Olave, DJ Moore, man. DJ Moore, he was the wide receiver 14 in 2019, right? So he had obviously a better season or a better finish than Chris Olave did last year. He didn't follow up that season with a better season. And what he saw was his ADP, his KTC rankings fall. After the wide receiver 14 season, he finished as the wide receiver 28 in 2020. And he obviously saw his rankings, his KTC rankings drop. So much so that even after a wide receiver 9 season last year, 16.9 fantasy points per game, just on the cusp of 17 points per game. I remember one of the Shane Says episodes, or maybe 2 of them, I discussed the 17-point range. Pretty rare. He was almost there, and I'm using player profiler scoring. He was almost there. Even after finishing wide receiver 9 last year, my dude is the wide receiver 18 on KTC. I understand, there's mitigating factors. We do have Rome Odunze joining the team and Keenan Allen, but I still think it's not great from a asset perspective that you put up a top 10 season and you are barely in the top 20 at your position. Next player on the board. So we've gone from Trevor Lawrence, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson gets a lot of grace in the community. Sometimes I feel like I'm attacking him, and I'm truly not. I just am confused sometimes by the grace that he's given. I understand his quarterback play, et cetera. But let's just stick to the facts, right? Garrett Wilson today, I don't know when you're watching this, it might be a little different, but as of today, Thursday, August the 15th, Garrett Wilson is the wide receiver 6, despite finishing as the wide receiver 32 last year. That was not an improvement on his rookie season when he was the wide receiver 30. And he actually scored fewer fantasy points, 0.2, just a little bit, 0.2 points per game less from his rookie season last year compared to his rookie season. Again, compared to Olave, that's just weird. Part of that, obviously, is that he is a target monster, an absolute target monster. 30% target share, which is much better than Chris Olave's. Much being a relative term, we're talking within 4 percentage points, but still, 30% is significant. It is rarefied air. He had a 30% target share. It's unfortunate that the quality of those targets were awful. Zach Wilson, Aaron Rodgers got, I think, 2 plays in. I don't even know if he attempted a pass. I don't remember. But either way, Garrett Wilson has had some very bad quarterback play. So I think we give him a lot of grace. We say, well, obviously, excellent draft capital, bad quarterback play. He's getting a new quarterback. He dominates targets. I'll give you that. So he is still the wide receiver 6. So let me ask you this, right? We are expecting a lot from him this year with Aaron Rodgers under center. What if, just a crazy hypothetical, what if Garrett Wilson tops out as a wide receiver 2? Let's just say he finishes as the wide receiver 23. What do you think happens to his value? It's going to drop. we only give so much grace. You have people like me that are telling you to give up on wide receivers after their rookie season when they don't do well, which, as an aside, is the correct take. Won't argue that. After 2 seasons, a lot of that grace is gone, even though he's the wide receiver 6. If he does not produce as a top 10 wide receiver, I would be absolutely shocked to see him still in the top 12 of Dynasty rankings, KTC rankings for wide receivers. A similar player to him that I found, cautionary tale, if you will, T. Higgins. T. Higgins got as high as the wide receiver 5. Some of the time, I just, as an aside, some of these, sometimes I go on KTC and just look up the history of where players have been and just can't believe it. And I don't even know if I remember what it was like at that time. But anyway, T. Higgins, he got as high as the wide receiver 5 on KTC prior to the 2022 season. That was his 3rd season. He finished as the wide receiver 12 in 2021. So there was optimism, there was hope, there was, I don't know another word for hopes and optimism. I think they both are the same word. So hope and optimism after his 2021 season when he finished as the wide receiver 12 in scoring. Sorry, and his KTC ranking moved up to wide receiver 5. Problem is that he took a step back in 2022. He finished as the wide receiver 26, and he saw his value fall all the way down to wide receiver 10 on KTC. Took another step back in 2023 when he was the wide receiver 40. So he's barely a top 24 wide receiver on KTC. So that is probably the extreme of what can happen to Garrett Wilson if he does not get his season, if he does not produce at an elite level. He is a player that I believe, again, just I believe, is in danger of seeing his value drop if he doesn't produce at an elite level. So again, just going back to the players, Trevor Lawrence, Chris Olave, and Garrett Wilson. As an aside, I wanted to see, or at least I wanted to give you some actionable information besides just trashing players. I swear to God, that's not what I'm doing. I promise you. What if either of these players would you buy? So I was going through some data, and at first I thought the player I'd want to buy, it's not Trevor Lawrence. That's not even in the discussion. It's between Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. I thought Garrett Wilson would be the one I want. Mostly because, well, there's a couple factors, right? The delta between what Garrett Wilson scored last year, 12.5 fantasy points per game, versus expected fantasy points per game, 20.2. That's a lot higher than the delta between what Chris Olave scored and his expected fantasy points per game. Olave scored 14.5 fantasy points per game. His expected fantasy points per game were 17.5. So that's not a lot of room for growth there, right? Whereas Wilson, again, there's 7.6 fantasy points just out in the ether. I know it's not apples to apples year to year, but you would think with some quarterback play improvement, Aaron Rodgers, that the efficiency should improve and Wilson's production should improve. Again, using Player Profiler, Wilson's target quality rating was 48th among wide receivers last year, whereas Olave's actually wasn't that bad. I know we give Derek Carr a lot of grief, but his quality target rate was 27%. So actually not that bad. Target quality rating was 27th in the league, among wide receivers. So actually not that bad. The market has also shown that they value Wilson higher. I talked about how his production decreased and somehow his value, his KTC value, stayed steady, whereas Chris Olave increased his production and it dropped, which means to me, again, all things being equal, let's say they both go out and have wide receiver 2 seasons. Let's say Garrett Wilson ends up as wide receiver 18 and Chris Olave ends up as wide receiver 16. You can almost guarantee that Garrett Wilson's going to have more value on the street. He's just a more liked asset for whatever reason. So I thought maybe that's where I would move. And I looked at some trades on Dynasty Daddy's Trade Finder or Trade Database. One of the two. You go on there, you use it. Dynasty Daddy, great site. Garrett Wilson for a random 25 first. I think I might give up a random 25 first for Garrett Wilson. Jonathan Taylor for Garrett Wilson. You watch me, you know how I feel about running backs. I'm smashing that. Another deal, someone gave up Marquise Hollywood Brown, 25 second, and a 26th first for Garrett Wilson and Adam Thielen. I'm not really sure why Adam Thielen's there, but sure. It's probably a deal I would make. But then I remembered, I work for Destination Devy. I have access to the Trinity tool. Well, actually, everyone has access to it, but I work there, so I should probably work it into my video. Try to get in good graces with my boss, Ray. He's a good guy, but you want to make sure you're in the good graces of your boss at all times. Anyway, so I use the Trinity tool, Trinity scores, excuse me, and I just looked them up. Olave last year, 8.55, pretty good. It fell a little bit from his rookie season, 8.82. And let me just, before we go any further, let me just explain the Trinity scores to you. Basically, if you're looking for a reason to make a move on Olave, what you are doing is looking at the Trinity scores. The range of scoring. Wide receiver, high-end wide receiver 1, you're looking for a 9.5. Low-end wide receiver 1s, you're looking for a 9.2 Trinity score. Wide receiver 2s, 8.66, excuse me. Wide receiver 3s come in about 7.9. Those are the ranges you're looking for. Obviously, you want a wide receiver 1. That 9.5, bananas. You want a 9.2, still a wide receiver 1. But you'll live with an 8.66, right? Somewhere in that range. A wide receiver in that range, give you wide receiver 2 production. And like I said, Chris Olave hit that 8.82 as a rookie in 2022, which is well within that wide receiver 2 range, and he did it as a rookie, which counts even more. It's like extra points, extra bonus, whatever you call it, extra credit. That's what you get when you're in school. Last year, like I said, it dipped a little bit, 8.55, but still in that wide receiver 2 range. Garrett Wilson, 7.94 as a rookie. Pretty good, but that is in wide receiver 3 range. Last year, it increased 8.14 Trinity score, but again, that is in wide receiver 3 range. High end. I don't know why my voice just cracked there. Excuse me. High end wide receiver 3 range, but still wide receiver 3 range. And what's great about the Trinity score, this is looking at what the wide receivers do, what they're responsible for. Doesn't take into account the quarterback play. So yes, you can tell me that Garrett Wilson's going to have improved quarterback play. But based off these Trinity scores, Olave might be the guy to buy. And that might be. I think he is. He's probably the one I'm actually leaning towards. If you like correlation, I think you do, right? How do these scores correlate? And how do they work? So basically what happens is Chris Olave scored an 8.55 Trinity score last year. What happens is that translates to the next season. That is in that wide receiver 2 range, for example. So 79% of the time that a wide receiver finishes in that wide receiver 2 Trinity score range, in 2022, for instance, in 2023, 79% of the time they finish as a wide receiver 2. It's a very high correlation. It's higher for wide receiver 1s, 81%. But neither of their scores, these players have scores in that range, so we won't even discuss it. But practical example. So as I noted, Chris Olave had an 8.82 Trinity score in 2022. That pointed to him being a wide receiver 2 in 2023. And guess where he happened to finish in 2023? Wide receiver 19. Firmly in that wide receiver 2 range. So looking at the Trinity score, which you should, because it's a great tool, it's all-inclusive, and it's predictive, I think I'm actually leaning towards Olave. But here's the great thing. Olave, you can also get pretty cheap. I looked up on some trades on Dynasty Daddy again. Chris Olave was acquired for Kyle Pitts and a second-round pick, and this is in a non-tight end premium league. And this is a super flex league, so yes, that second matters a little more, but non-tight end premium, it's Kyle Pitts. I'll take a risk on Kyle Pitts in a tight end premium league, but it's non-tight end premium. Give me Chris Olave all day. Another deal I saw was Michael Evans, the 2024 201 and the 2024 301 for Chris Olave, and they even threw in Gabe Davis. That's an absolute smash to me. Absolutely smash. And shout out to anyone still having rookie drafts. You guys are the true heroes. August 15th, people still having rookie drafts. That's dedication, man. But you know what? It's probably not a bad idea with the preseason going on now, especially for the later round picks where that stuff can be really affected. So anyway, I'm sorry. I get distracted easily. If you watch the show, you know that's me. Last trade I found on there was Chris Olave for the 209, 2025 second, and a 108. And this is in a 2 QB league. 10 teams, start 9. 2 QBs, not super flex, so you can guarantee that more than a few quarterbacks went off the range. So 108, we're probably looking at Brian Thomas Jr., someone around like that. Xavier Worthy. So Xavier Worthy, a second-round pick, and another second-round pick for Chris Olave. It's pretty cheap. So Chris Olave is probably based off the Trinity score and my own, I'll admit, biases that come into this because I really liked Chris Olave and he's produced well. Whatever. I don't want to rehash it. Chris Olave is the dude I'm probably trying to buy. But that said, I'm okay buying Garrett Wilson too. Trinity score is a tool. It's a good tool. But you know me, I'm gonna freelance a little bit. Garrett Wilson, like I said, the market appreciates him more. So if Garrett Wilson goes out there and puts up a wide receiver 15 season, the profit I can make off of him, probably really, really good. And that's kind of how I play the game. I'm always looking at if I can't get the elite player, can I at least get something that helps me get to an elite asset? So that's it. Like I said, 3 players, went a little long, as usual. I'm sorry. My apologies. Probably too many also, my apologies. But yeah, 3 players that I think are in the danger zone. It's a critical year for him. Trevor Lawrence, or Trevor, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson. Who do you think it's a critical year for? And don't give me JMO. I want somebody that's already on the cusp, or already an elite asset. Garrett Wilson being specific to this video, while Chris Olave and Trevor Lawrence are on the cusp. Let me know who you think is in the danger zone that needs to produce this year to either to hold that value, hold on to that dream of being an elite asset. All right, I appreciate y'all. Everybody have a good one. Later.